He had merely sketched the woman sitting across from him, but to his surprise, the woman unabashedly unwrapped the chocolate bar he had placed on the table and began enjoying it without hesitation. The man froze, with a flicker of astonishment in his eyes. To stake his claim over the chocolate in front of this peculiar woman, he broke off a piece and popped it into his mouth, then gave her a playful, teasing glance. However, the woman seemed entirely unfazed. Instead, she gracefully broke off another piece and savored it as if she were unaware of his silent challenge. This quirky encounter amused them both immensely. They exchanged smiles, marveling at their unspoken connection. Just as the man was about to break the silence and speak, the woman's stop arrived unexpectedly. She rose with an effortless grace and left, leaving behind only the faint aroma of chocolate.
It's all yours.
She didn't respond to Cameron's unspoken goodwill with words. Instead, she offered him a lingering glance full of unspoken meaning before stepping off the train. As Cameron prepared to exit the train himself, he suddenly realized something. The identical chocolate bar in his pocket was still untouched and intact. At that moment, it dawned on him he had just unwittingly played out a ridiculously awkward yet humorous scene. But fate often works in mysterious ways, weaving peculiar encounters in its own unique fashion. The next day, Cameron and the woman crossed paths again, eager to explain the misunderstanding from the day before.
I also purchased the Echo bar. And I'm hoping you worked that out by now, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to see your face when you realized.
As an apology, Cameron gave the other person a carefully painted portrait. Yet, before they could delve further into conversation, an inexplicable smile passed between them. They shook hands warmly and went their separate ways. As Cameron turned away, regret began to gnaw at him. He berated himself for not seizing the moment to ask for the woman's contact information. Just then, her voice called out to him from behind.
Hey, Cameron? Here.
Oh no, that's for you. Keep it.
Give it to me again.
Okay.
Her simple gesture brought a childlike joy to Cameron's face. Happiness comes quietly like the light in his eyes. Love that goes both ways is always passionate and beautiful. They were inseparable and soon started a family. Soon after, his wife gave birth to a bright and intelligent son. The family was like the warm sunshine on a spring day, and the future was bright. But life, it seemed, had other plans. Recently, Cameron had begun experiencing sudden bouts of dizziness, as if the world around him were spinning uncontrollably. He tried hard to stay awake, but in the end he couldn't control himself and fainted. After a thorough medical examination, the diagnosis came like a crushing blow. He had an incurable terminal illness. Several times, Cameron tried to share this devastating news with his wife. Yet, each time the words reached his lips, he swallowed them back down. His mind would flash to the image of his wife mourning her younger brother's death, a loss so profound it shattered her. She had wept for months, retreating into herself and locking herself away in her room for half a year to grieve and heal. Cameron understood his wife's fragile heart all too well. He knew she couldn't bear another loss. So, he chose silence, burying his fear and despair deep within himself. Loneliness and helplessness began to consume him. Looking at the warm smiles of his wife and children in front of him, Cameron felt a sense of melancholy and sadness well up in his heart. But this perfect happiness was as fragile as glass. Cameron knew that his death would shatter their idyllic world. Teetering on the brink of despair, a memory flashed in his mind. An advertisement he had once glimpsed for cloning services. A grim choice loomed before him. Should he tell his family the truth and let them face the inevitable grief? Or should he let a clone take his place, continuing to love and care for them after he was gone? For Cameron, the answer became clear. He chose the latter. With a mix of resignation and hope, Cameron sought out the scientist behind the cloning program and expressed his willingness to participate. When he finally saw his clone for the first time, he was struck with awe. The figure before him was an exact replica, a flawless mirror image of himself. The height, face contour, and even the fine lines on the skin are exactly the same as the reflection in the mirror. The only distinction was a small, extra mole on the clone's hand. Although Cameron had mentally prepared himself for this moment, standing face to face with the clone who would soon replace him filled him with an overwhelming unease. A wave of resistance and panic rose uncontrollably within him. Sensing Cameron's discomfort, the scientist calmly introduced him to another subject, a female clone. This woman led a simple life as an ordinary office worker, blissfully unaware that she was a clone. What truly moved him was observing her tender relationship with her young daughter. The mother clone showered her child with genuine, selfless love, creating scenes of warmth and happiness. To Cameron, these moments were like golden wheat fields bathed in sunlight. comforting and reassuring. It was as if he could see his wife and children living a similarly happy life with the clone. When Cameron returned home, looking at his smart and cute son and gentle and virtuous wife, Cameron smiled kindly and gently. However, this warm and happy scene has pierced Cameron's heart like a thorn. His eyes grew moist as the weight of his decision loomed over him, waves of inner turmoil crashing relentlessly against his resolve. He understood that he must not selfishly abandon his wife and child. Perhaps letting another Cameron continue this love in his place was the best choice. Cameron made his decision. He told his wife he would be traveling for a few days and reassured her not to worry. In truth, he was severing himself emotionally from his family to proceed with the cloning process. At the lab, the memory transfer began, so he began to transfer memories to the clone, and his consciousness slowly flowed into the clone's mind like running water. The fleeting fragments of life are like ancient scroll paintings that have been gently brushed by the hands of time, gradually becoming clearer in the consciousness of the clone. The sweet companionship since meeting his wife, the father-son bonding moments, and the beautiful family moments of the trio all flashed through his mind like a carousel. When the transfer was complete, those cherished memories became an integral part of the clone's identity, perfectly preserved. As the clone opened his eyes for the first time, his life became indistinguishable from Cameron's. The scientist explained to the clone that he was created to be a replacement, but the clone did not resist or reject this reality. His newly implanted memories made the love and struggles of Cameron's life feel deeply personal, as though he had lived them himself. At this time, Cameron is immersed in a happy hour of playing video games with his son, and the laughter echoes between them as it is projected. But suddenly, a dizziness like a dark claw mercilessly drags him into the abyss. Fortunately, just before his consciousness fades, he manages to close the video call in time. This made Cameron deeply realize that the sands in his hourglass of life had almost run out, and his remaining time was incredibly short. When Cameron saw the activated clone for the first time, his emotions were noticeably calmer than before. There was no need for many words between them because they both understood the weight of their shared responsibility. However, not everything went smoothly. The first real test presented a significant challenge. The clone had to communicate with Cameron's wife in his place. As the video call was dialed, the clone, initially showing a hint of nervousness, quickly settled into his role upon seeing Cameron's wife. He became completely immersed in the moment. Even forgetting that he was a clone, he chatted with her easily, sharing stories and laughing together, as if they were the closest couple in the world. Meanwhile, Cameron watched from the sidelines, his hands clenched tightly, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and jealousy. It felt as if this imposter was taking over everything that was his. Finally, unable to endure the torment any longer, Cameron abruptly ended the call. This sudden action enraged the clone, and the two of them broke into a heated argument.
What did you do? No, I don't like this. You think I like this? Talking to my wife under a spotlight? She's not your wife!
Their words were sharp, emotions running high, as they unleashed their frustration and fury at each other. But in the midst of their fight, Cameron's illness struck again. The clone, shaken back to his senses, began to feel guilty. He realized that he was just a replacement, but for a brief moment during the call, he had forgotten his identity as a clone. This experience, however, made them both understand that they were intrinsically tied by fate, bound as a shared entity. The doctor reassured the clone, explaining, "This isn't your fault. You don't just have Cameron's memories, you also carry his emotions and experiences. At this moment, you are Cameron. There is no real separation between you two." When Cameron regained consciousness, the clone approached him to apologize. Deep down, both of them knew they weren't entirely ready for this transition. As the moment of his replacement loomed closer, Cameron felt a powerful urge to go back and say a final goodbye to his wife and child. But just as he arrived home and prepared to step inside, his illness struck again. He felt a dizzying wave overwhelm him, and he collapsed helplessly to the ground. If his wife discovered this, the entire plan would fall apart. Fortunately, Cameron regained consciousness in the nick of time. He struggled to climb back into the car, his eyes filled with longing as he gazed through the window at his wife, who was so close yet impossibly out of reach. Her face glowed like a distant flower on the far shore, radiant but unattainable. Cameron's illness worsened under the weight of these unfulfilled emotions. He understood, with painful clarity, that he could no longer appear before his wife and child as the man they once knew. His time was running out. To ensure the clone could replace him seamlessly, Cameron decided to spend more time with his double, observing their subtle differences in daily life. But to their mutual astonishment, The resemblance between them was almost unnerving, whether it was the calm steadiness of their personalities or the meticulousness of their habits. The two of them were like perfect reflections in a mirror. The only difference was that Cameron's life was nearing its end, while the clone still had the health and strength to carry on. In the end, the clone returned to that warm and loving home in Cameron's place. Cameron's wife didn't notice anything unusual because the clone's behavior was indistinguishable from Cameron's. However, when they embraced, the family dog began barking incessantly. Perhaps, in the dog's eyes, the clone could never truly replace its real master. Despite the dog's reaction, Cameron's wife didn't suspect a thing. She was overwhelmed with joy, completely immersed in the happiness of the moment. The real Cameron, meanwhile, could only watch his family from a distance, through the lens of the clone's glasses. He gazed at his wife and child's smiling faces, and a faint smile unknowingly formed on his lips. Yet, in the next moment, a shadow clouded his heart. He could only linger in the background, mourning the happiness that should have been his.
I couldn't lose you, Cam. I couldn't live.
At first, Cameron believed the happiness the clone brought to his family would flow like a gentle stream, constant and unchanging. But as time passed, he began to notice subtle changes. The clone was removing its glasses more and more frequently. When Cameron asked the doctor about this, she explained that all clones initially struggle to accept that they are merely replacements. Removing the glasses is part of that process. However, this behavior also signals that the clone is beginning to fully integrate into its new life. Despite the unease and confusion that churned in Cameron's heart, the sight of his wife and child's happiness compelled him to swallow his doubts and dissatisfaction. He chose to endure, to sacrifice his own feelings for their sake. But the undercurrent of unease was always there, quietly building, waiting to break through the surface. One night, that unease manifested as a terrifying nightmare. In his dream, Cameron saw the clone raising its hand against his wife in anger. He woke up in a cold sweat, deeply shaken, unable to put his mind at ease. Cameron decided to escape the lab and secretly visit his family. On the journey, he wrestled with his emotions, wondering how he could keep his growing fear and pain under control. When he finally reached his home, he didn't dare approach his wife and child directly. He feared that if he and the clone appeared together, all their careful plans would unravel. Cameron crept into the study instead. On the desk, he saw a beautiful drawing created by the clone. As he studied the artwork, Cameron realized that such a masterpiece could only come from a calm and stable mind. He sat quietly on the sofa, and the scroll in front of him seemed to be a world that was both real and distant. His thoughts wandered within it, unable to escape them. Then he opened the computer and found videos of his wife and child, filled with laughter and joy. These were moments he had never seen through the lab's surveillance monitors. As he watched the scenes of happiness unfold, Cameron felt his doubts and worries begin to fade. When he read through the clone's conversations with his wife, he found heartfelt words, tender care, and a love so genuine it left no room for doubt. In that moment, Cameron came to a profound realization. The clone had been loving his wife on his behalf all along. Suddenly, the clone appeared behind him. As their eyes met, a surge of complicated emotions flooded Cameron's heart. He had expected anger or reproach for his selfishness and audacity, but to his surprise, the clone's gaze was filled with complete understanding and acceptance. Not only did the clone not drive him away, but he also offered Cameron a chance to say his goodbyes. Just then, their dog ran into the room. Seeing two identical versions of its owner, the dog seemed briefly confused. Fortunately, it didn't bark. After swapping clothes with the clone, Cameron tiptoed into his son's room. He gently woke the sleeping child, and together, they went to the living room to share some snacks. The clone silently watched from a distance, his heart filling with deep sympathy for Cameron. What seemed like simple, everyday moments were treasures beyond reach for Cameron. The boy was lost in the joy of the moment, unaware that this was his father's final goodbye. His radiant smile warmed Cameron's heart like sunlight, but that same smile was a double-edged sword, bringing both joy and a piercing ache. Cameron studied his son's face intently, his eyes filled with love and sorrow. He knew he wouldn't be there to see his son grow up, attend his graduation, or celebrate his wedding. In his heart, he was preemptively celebrating all the milestones he'd never witness. Even his breaths were trembling with emotion. After his heartfelt farewell to his son, Cameron went to the bedroom to see his wife. He embraced her tightly, pouring all his love and longing into this one final moment of closeness. Sensing something unusual, his wife didn't press for answers. Instead, she gently reassured him, telling him everything would be okay. Cameron asked her if she was happy with their life now, and she nodded firmly. Relief washed over Cameron. and for the first time in a long while, he smiled genuinely. His eyes were filled with deep affection as he gazed at her. How he wished time could freeze at that moment. Memories of their life together played like a silent film in his mind. He hated the fact that his love for his wife had vanished with the wind, and that he could not be with her until the end. He was also glad that he would never have to see his wife show her grief again, because not only did a clone fill his place, but that person also perfectly maintained the existing happiness of his wife and children. Before leaving, Cameron solemnly handed the clone a meaningful ring. This gesture symbolized Cameron entrusting everything to the other version of himself. He said nothing more because he knew the clone would love and protect his family with all his heart, just as he would. In the end, they shook hands and parted ways, reconciling and completely withdrawing from each other's lives. Not long after, the doctor informed Cameron that the clone's memories of being a replacement had been completely erased. He's now fully restored to being the version of you before your illness, the doctor explained. Cameron didn't feel much emotion after hearing this, because this was exactly the result he wanted. To Cameron's surprise, the doctor added that the clone had left him a gift before the memory wipe. It was a recording about love, about the wife's genuine feelings of love for you.
Babe. Tell me you love me.
I love you.
No.
What are you doing? I'm chopping stuff.
For real, Pete.
What?
Look me in the eyes and tell me you love me.
What are you doing?
Just, come on, for real. I need to hear it.
Okay. I love you, Cameron Turner. Always have. And always will.
He knew that his wife loved him deeply, that feeling was unique and eternal, and that no one could take that love away from him. Shortly after, on a secluded island, Cameron reached the end of his life. His passing was like the fall of a brilliant star, evoking both sorrow and reverence. In his final moments, he left behind the most romantic lie. He had sent an angel to continue loving his family in his place. An angel carefully chosen and tested, a perfect substitute to ensure his family's everlasting happiness. It's said that a swan sings its most beautiful song before its death, a poignant and resolute farewell. Perhaps that's why the film is titled Swan Song. It sings of determination, sacrifice, and the strength to let go for the sake of love. The concept of cloning challenges our understanding of life and its boundaries. But when standing at the crossroads of life, faced with the inevitability of leaving, would we be willing to let a clone care for the people we love? Watching oneself be replaced is undoubtedly painful, but for love, would we choose to let that bond continue, even through another version of ourselves? Perhaps you are me, and I am no longer myself. I am about to lose everything, so, please, continue to love my family in my name. I'm a film enthusiast. If you enjoyed this analysis, please subscribe to my channel. See you next time.